really sound so terribly different from any other kind of addiction, I wonder if we might just talk a few minutes so you have a better understanding from inside yourself about what drug addicts are really all about. If we can just talk for a few minutes about the whole problem of what is addiction? What really goes on, basically, in addiction of any kind? What do we mean by an addiction? I hope you all feel free to share with me your feelings about it, because if you don't understand something about your own addictions, you're not going to be able to understand very well what goes on really in the drug addict. And we all have addictions of one kind or another.
Yeah.
Cigarettes, coffee, and alcohol, and sweets, sometimes just food, TV, sex, and, on and on we go, reading. Yeah. What's happening then in an addiction? We all have our own addictions, and we need to understand really that a drug addiction is not really that much different. It seems to be more severe. But the purpose of any addiction is really the same. What do we mean by an addiction? Yeah.
Something pleasurable, something you like to do.
Okay. Is there no difference, though, between a pleasurable pastime and an addiction? How do they become different when it becomes an addiction?
When you start having to depend on it.
It controls you.
When it starts to control you. We're talking now about what we mean by dependency. Now, in any case, what is a dependency? We say it controls us, but what do we mean by a dependency?
Dependency is a need.
Dependency of a particular need, and under all circumstances, on the surface the needs may seem to be different, but under all circumstances, dependencies fulfill a particular purpose. What happens to us when we don't give in to that dependency, whatever your dependency happens to be? Food, or alcohol, or cigarettes, or coffee. Be with that for a moment yourself and see what happens when you don't have that dependency available to you. You don't have your cigarettes handy.
Anxiety.
Nervous? Get nervous?
You get nervous.
Overrun?
Anxiety.
Now, what are we nervous about? In other words, we're saying that whatever we depend upon is that thing that we use to keep ourselves from feeling pain. That's truly what it is. Mostly psychological pain, mental pain of one kind or another. We feel it on the surface as a fear, don't we? If we don't have our cigarettes, if we don't take our coffee in the morning, we get the shakes. If we don't take our cigarette, we get the shakes. If we don't have our bit of alcohol, we get shaky. We have to ask ourselves, because if we're going to understand what's going on in the drug addict, we have to understand what's going on within us so that we're not really so terribly different than the drug addict. And if the truth be known, I suppose if there were laws against cigarette smoking or the eating of sweets or overeating for that matter, many of you would be in here instead of some of the girls. So it's a matter of what it is that we're dependent upon. It may hurt to feel that way, but it's probably quite true. I'm not so sure that many of us can really give up our dependencies any more than some of the girls can give up their own on drugs. And when I'm talking about dependencies, I'm including anything upon which we depend, including people, of course. Many parents even depend on children. We know that children depend on parents, obviously, because if children don't have their parents, they have certain kinds of painful feelings to face, of insecurity and abandonment and all the rest of that. But you know, some parents depend on children too. What do you suppose for?
Companionship.
Quite often companionship. And what are we defending, say, with this companionship? What happens to us if we don't have this companionship?
We don't feel needed.
We don't feel needed. All right. What happens if we don't feel needed?
We're not important then.
Then we
We
become
don't matter.
frightened, no?
We're not important. We get frightened. Where is the pain? What's wrong with not feeling important? What is the pain of that? Our children don't need me. Nobody needs me. I'm not very important. I have no use. I'm worthless. You feel the pain starts to come. So we are dependent. We are addicted, meaning we are dependent upon that thing, meaning person as well as object, that keeps us from feeling pain, psychological pain. Now we have to really understand what specifically this pain is if we're going to study drug addicts. Each of you must understand within yourselves what your own pain is from which you are running with your own particular addiction and dependency. Otherwise, we're going to feel kind of superior, when we talk about the girls with drug problems and say, well, they're weak-willed people, They haven't got what it takes to really curb their addiction. But those of you that are dependent on your morning coffee, just try to do without it sometime. Or on your cigarette when you really need it, just try to do without that. Or when sexual tension builds up and so forth, let's see what you can do without that. Or whatever it may be. See what it feels like to lose your children. Or to lose your husband or wife. There's a tremendous emptiness sometimes inside, a tremendous hollowness, a tremendous meaninglessness. And for many, many people, as I said before, they become dependent on their own children for a purpose in life. To feel needed, to feel worthwhile. Just to feel that I am not living aimlessly and purposelessly because there's such an emptiness, and that emptiness is such a painful feeling. Well, drug addicts are not really different than we are, really not. The object that they use for their dependency is the only thing that's different. And they're different just one other way that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But it's quite possible that when most of us were growing up, if drugs were the most convenient means for utilization as a means of escaping from pain, that perhaps many of us would be in that situation. We had perhaps other kinds of things like alcohol and cigarettes. But most of all, we have some other more basic way of not feeling pain that drug addicts don't usually have. Before I get into that in any more detail, it's important to understand, it may be hard for you to believe, but there truly is a fear in us, in all of us, worse than the fear of death. Can any of you imagine what fear we all have that's really greater than the fear of death? If you don't understand this, you can't understand any addiction.
I think I have a fear of being alone.
Fear of being alone.
When people say because of this pain, I don't want to go on, I would rather die.
Yes.
Then the fear of pain is stronger than the fear of death.
Yes. We call it hunger or abandonment or loneliness or isolation. There is that one thing that underlies all these particular fears, and that is a fear of being helpless and hopeless in the face of pain. If we feel helpless in the face of pain, death becomes then a positive thing. It becomes the ending of our pain. And it's at these times when suicide becomes a very real possibility. To feel helpless, not only helpless in the face of pain, but to feel hopeless about it, meaning not only am I helpless in the face of pain, but as far as off as I can see in the future, I'm always going to be helpless in the face of pain. Death becomes a much better alternative. Can you feel that within yourself? I think it's very important to understand that, because if we're going to understand the sense of desperateness that goes on in any addiction, to understand how people really can feel desperate, even to beg for death sometimes, even to consider suicide, we have to understand that to be abandoned in the face of pain feel totally helpless in the face of pain, and to feel hopeless about that, to see yourself living for the rest of your life with a particular sense of pain and seeing no avenue of escape, that's a horror of horrors. None of us can probably endure that. Then death becomes a welcome friend. I'm sure you've seen this in people that have physical pain, like cancer and so forth, and they're suffering and they blow their brains out. Or people that have psychological pain. If I'm such a terribly fearful person and all my security is gone, and I have to live in a world where every day I get up in the morning, I shiver and I shake, and I feel panic, and I know that I'm always going to feel that way, why should I continue living? It becomes a very rational kind of approach for many people who then say, well, death is the only alternative. Now there are some people who say, well, I don't have to live with pain every day. I've got my little addiction. For most of us, it's a cigarette here and there. The more I talk, the more people lighting up the cigarette. Making nervous. Bringing the pain more to focus. Well, we all have that. And it's an honest kind of thing. Nothing terrible about it. Fortunately, we can deal with our pain. The truth is we're escaping from the pain. With the cigarette, with the coffee, with the TV, with the reading, with the alcohol. We're escaping. We're escape artists. And somehow we've never learned how to deal with pain except through escape. Our escapes tend to be relatively adequate. For some people, those escapes are not adequate. Whatever they do to escape, they're terribly frightened and burdened by this feeling of psychological pain, insecurity, fearfulness, depression. So we have to understand, what is it about the drug addict especially that is different from most of us? Why can't they get by with a cigarette, with a cup of coffee? Any hunches about that? They're not born weaker. It isn't just that they're somehow the inferior human beings.
They're lacking inner strength. Why do they?
Yeah, so what do we mean by inner strength? How much strength do we have to break our cigarette addiction or coffee addiction or whatever our addiction is?
I think it was just when they started, it was more available to them than cigarettes were, or drugs were to me when I started smoking.
Very possibly.
Point two is if we tried drugs, perhaps we would become addicted to them. How do we know that we wouldn't? Not having tasted them or felt the effect.
Right.
Chances are you probably wouldn't, because you have other means that suit you as a means of running from your pain. You will turn to the drug or the strongest thing that's available when there is nothing else available to you that serves to be effective enough to help you to run away from the tremendous inner pain. We have to understand that pain is much more deeply. And the reason that most of us have other means is that most of us somewhere along the way have learned to be able to rely on people as a way of removing pain. Let's understand how that originates. When we're very young and our mommy and daddy loves us, and we fall down and hurt ourselves, we go running to mommy and daddy and say, "Don't worry, it's all right." We get fearful and insecure, they put their arms around us and they give us a hug. And so whenever we're fearful and whenever we have pain, we have learned to trust people as the means of alleviating that pain. We don't need any other crutch. We know how to be dependent on people. We don't have to rely upon ourselves as a means of alleviating our own pain. It requires a tremendous amount of trust to be able to rely on somebody else to take care of your pain. Now, if I grow up not being able to trust anybody else to help me with my pain, Pain meaning, remember, all these feelings, including feelings of worthlessness. If I can turn to somebody and see love in their eyes, and they give me a nice hug, and I feel the warmth, not only of their body, but of their feelings toward me, then I have feelings of worth. And the painful doubts about my worthlessness subside. What if I haven't got that? Not only that, what we're saying about the extreme addict, in this case we're talking about the drug addict, what we're saying is, can we close that door because the door is What we are saying about the drug addict is not only can they not turn to people as a source of security, insecurity being one of the painful things that we run from, but on top of that, people add to their sense of pain and insecurity. They can't trust people. Why can't they trust people? How do people give them pain?
Everyone's let them down from the time they were born.
Yes, let them down in regard to what especially?
Oh, love, security, normal family living.
Okay, and what's the interpretation that one makes? You know, if I need love and worth and security, and you let me down, what is the conclusion that I make? I'm worthless. I'm worthless. And that is the pain. That is the real pain. I'm worthless. Because really, one must understand that if I'm worthless, I'm really nothing. It isn't just a conviction that I'm worthless, but when you really are totally worthless, you're nothing. And that's a very, very painful feeling. So most of us, somewhere along the way, we've been able to rely on people to give us a sense of worth and to help us deny our feelings of worthlessness, so that if we're feeling what we call down, depressed, which means we're really feeling worthless and angry to ourselves for being worthless, we can turn to somebody and hopefully, if we're lucky enough, and get the natural high that comes with loving feelings. Love is the natural high that we all have. If you haven't got love, you have no high. And then you become very dependent on running away from the lows, meaning not only the depressions, but any aspect of pain, which brings you down. To be low is to be worthless. But for many drug addicts, it's more than just being worthless. It's being abandoned to a tremendous state of panic, insecurity, helplessness, vulnerability, fearfulness. And that feeling has to be run away from. Now, the important ingredient in the drug addiction is that the drug addict has to feel that he has or she has at her fingertips the immediate means of running away from pain. You see, you can't trust people because you can't control people well enough to guarantee that they will give you the immediate elimination of the pain. Why? Because a lot of these drug addicts are, as I said, are very fearful about being abandoned in the face of pain, feeling helpless in the face of pain. Therefore, they have to have at their own fingertips the source of control to immediately run from the pain whenever they want to run. An immediate high, under their control. Most of us don't have that immediate high. We resort to people. But you can't control people that much, where you can say, well, I'm feeling low, make me feel good. Give me a hug and a kiss and tell me how wonderful I am and how beautiful I look, You can't depend on them to tell you all the things you want to hear. Most of us do it anyway because we can suffer a little bit of pain and we have the conviction that somewhere along the way our loved ones and friends will love us and we'll feel high. But not so the drug addict, who is convinced that you can't turn to people for that. It isn't immediate enough, and here I am with all this pain, and where is the escape that I need to have because I'm being overwhelmed by this pain? I need something at my fingertips, something I can trust that will work every time I need it, every time I use it. And you can't trust people for that, because people won't work every time you need them. Learned that a long time ago, since childhood. You need people, they don't work for you, especially at your fingertips. So the drug becomes the crutch, it becomes a dependency. They become dependent upon having that, even if they don't have to resort to it. Just knowing that it's there. Just like most of us, we don't always need our mommy and daddy. But if we fall down, just knowing that they're there is enough. So therefore we can leave our mommy and daddy and run around outdoors, and walk down the next block and so forth, because we know she's home. But if she's not home, we can't go very far from home. Then we get clingy and we get fearful, and I want my mommy, and where is she, and so forth. We're very brave as long as we know that there's somebody at home that will pick us up if we fall, that will make us secure if we get scared, that if we get injured, because they love us so much, will immediately make sure that something good is done for us. But if I don't feel my parents love me and I get hurt, they'll probably be glad if I die. After all, there's an extra mouth to feed. They probably have more kids than they want anyway. I'm probably just a bother to them anyway. I don't dare get hurt. If I get hurt, it'll be terrible. So where's my security to come from? I don't have any. The only security I might find is in another group of drug addicts who I know are just as fearful as I am and wouldn't hurt me, because they know themselves how vulnerable they are to hurt. A lot of hurt goes on there anyway, because they really can't even trust another drug addict. They can't trust anybody really but themselves. And even then they don't trust themselves, because they don't trust their own feelings, because they run from their own feelings. They don't trust their own self-destructiveness, because they hate themselves, because they've been convinced of their worthlessness. And when you're convinced of your worthlessness, at a very, very deep level, you are really convinced that you don't have the right to live, that you're a nuisance to the world, that the world would be much better off without you, that you are superfluous to everybody, and that the whole world would be much better off, and certainly happier, if you didn't exist. Because whoever you relate to is made unhappy as a function of your existence. It becomes a reality. So how are we going to help the drug addict? If we can't help ourselves, then we're not in a position to be antagonistic for the drug addict. If we can't cut out our own cigarettes, not through willpower, if we can't cut out our own coffee, and if we can't put aside watching TV for 4 hours or whatever we do, but we have to have our friends on the phone for hours at a time, so we won't have to feel alone and lonely, and we won't have to listen to our own thoughts and feelings, which are so terribly ugly and painful, all the depression, all the emptiness, all the purposelessness, all the loneliness that's in there. So we escape, don't we? We talk to people. We rationalize it. We say, basically, I'm just a friendly person. Why shouldn't I do it? Most of the time, we really need it. Not that we just enjoy it. We need it. We're afraid to be alone with ourselves, because we're not very good company to ourselves, because we're running the painful things within us. So then, how can we say to these girls, you must stop your drug addiction, when we don't know how? We can't even stop our own small addictions with the cigarettes and the coffee and all the rest of it. And we're asking them to stop something which is much more intense, upon which they are much more dependent. Because even without our coffee and cigarettes, you probably still have your husband. And dear friends, your mommy and daddy who probably love you. You've got something to turn to for security and worth. You've got anything. All security and worth comes from the drug. The drug gives you the high. That makes you feel good all over. It helps you escape from the tremendous sense of despair. It's like being dropped into a well that's pitch black in there. And it's a total blackness, feelings of despair, worthlessness, helplessness, destructive feelings. You name it, it's all down there. So what are we going to do for them? First, we must understand the problem of addiction, of dependency. We're not talking about drug addiction. We're talking about any addiction and any dependency. Now, it may surprise you. Many of you think, for example, that you have handled your addiction. Some of you say, well, look, I cut out smoking. I haven't smoked for a year. So it happens I gained 64 pounds.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Have we handled the addiction?
No, we've acquired it.
We've transferred it, haven't we? We've transferred it. And that isn't beating addiction. You know, that isn't beating the dependency. We just transferred the dependency. And we do the same thing later on. We become dependent on our children, and when our children grow up and older and leave, we feel a tremendous void and emptiness in our lives. We find a new dependency. Actually, some women do become alcoholic because they can't find a better dependency. Or we make new friends, or we get involved in clubs and so forth, or whatever we do, or take new children into the home and pretend that they really are dependent on us, but we really are dependent more on them, fill our own emptiness and loneliness. It's transference. That isn't beating the addiction. So we must understand that if you beat one addiction, you have beaten all addictions. Truly, that is so. You beat one addiction, meaning you get to the very core of that addiction and don't run from the pain that the addiction or the dependency helps you to run from. A tremendous inner feeling of emptiness, of nothingness, of worthlessness, whatever label you want to put on that inner feeling of total non-existence. You go into the depths of yourself, and when you feel that feeling, you don't run from it, but you yield to it. You let that feeling come as much as it wants to come, and that's the end of that addiction. And that's the end of all addictions. Because any addiction, you're running from that. You're running from your own inner emptiness, your own hollowness, your own worthlessness, whatever it may be. When you become integrated with that, when you become partners with that, when you can embrace that as your mommy and daddy embraced you with a love, because it is yourself, it is your deepest self, then all your addictions are gone. And if you don't do that, then none of your addictions are gone. Then all you will do at best is to transfer your addictions to those that are more socially acceptable or not as easily observable to people. But you're still a slave. You still have them. But at least they don't get you into trouble as they do for some of the other girls. Because those girls have no choice in the matter. They need something that is readily available. So I don't want any of us to think somehow that we're just talking about a problem that these girls have. They really are terribly different than we are. This is a human problem. And this is a society that encourages, really, dependencies. Because the more dependent you are on whatever you're dependent on, the more you buy. The more you have to have. And some people are dependent on all kinds of things. Some people are even dependent on stimulation. Got to travel from one place to another, always see things. In other words, what's built into our own society, really, is an escape from boredom. And to build stimulation up to such a level, to get you involved with radio and TV and color TV and noise and all the rest of it, whereby if you don't have that constant stimulation, you feel terribly bored. And you know what boredom is, really? You try to stay with the feeling of